Filters are a lot of fun to get to know, and there's so many of them. I'm not going to have time to go through all of those, but I'll introduce you to a couple really common ones and kind of give you the basics of how to use filters. Now, one thing to know is that filters don't all work with CMYK documents. So if I have an image open like this one that is currently CMYK color mode, which I can see by the tab up here, it says CMYK, and also if I go to my image menu and choose mode, I can see that it is in CMYK. And then go to my filter menu and start browsing down through these, you'll notice that some of them are grayed out and are not available. That is because they were not written to work with CMYK color mode. Now, a lot of these will work with CMYK, so don't just assume you have to work in RGB when you're using filters, but it is a way to make all of the things available to you if you're working with RGB. So I'm going to close out of my CMYK version of this picture and just work with the RGB picture. Now, filters will permanently change the pixels of the layer that you apply them to. So like when we were restoring or retouching a photo, it's a good idea to make a duplicate of your original image. So I'm going to do that by clicking and dragging this image down to my new layer icon, and I'm going to call this one Liquify, which is the first filter we're going to look at. If you don't have anything selected, it will do this to the whole image. If you want to affect a very specific part, you need to select it, but in this case we're doing the whole image. Go to the filter menu and choose Liquify, or you can get it by holding Shift Command X. And it will open your picture with a completely different interface. And this is what gets used on magazines to make people's eyes a little bigger, their lips a little bigger, and their noses a little smaller, but it's a lot of fun to play with. So I'm going to start with the bloat tool, which is about halfway down. And it has a circle like it's a brush. You can affect the size by your left and right bracket keys. If you hold Shift, I thought it made it bigger, but it doesn't. So I'm going to get a fairly big one, and then if you just click on an area, and you'll watch that eyeball get bigger and bigger. Which is kind of fun. This is actually a lot of fun to do with a picture of yourself or of a buddy or something and really mess with it. Now, something that's really cool about this is it doesn't really get things pixelated as it makes things bigger or larger. It's got some really cool tricks up its sleeve. Now you can do the opposite by choosing the pinch tool or by holding down Option, which will switch you back and forth between a tool and its opposite, and that will make things even smaller. So I'm just clicking and dragging to affect this whole area and just sucking that down as little as it's going to go, just for fun and kicks and giggles. Some other things that you can do are forward warp tool, which is the finger one at the very top. And I'm going to make this fairly big and then show you that you can click and drag to actually move parts of the image in. So yes, I'm sure you can imagine how this would be used on a people photo. I chose to do it on a cat photo because I'm actually not a fan of doing this sort of thing on people photos. I've said this already, but I really don't care for all of the personal self-image problems that happen when you start making somebody's photo look Barbie model perfect. I like doing this sort of thing instead. So this is what we're doing. Anyway, you can play down with the rest of these and really try them out. Now this is not an in-depth look at this filter. This filter has got a lot of different features. I would encourage you to go to YouTube and type in Liquify filter or Liquify Photoshop, and you'll come across all sorts of really cool tutorials that will show you not only how to do what I've just shown you, but how to mask off areas so that it won't be affected, as well as some of the stronger, more powerful tools of this. But for right now, we're going to just make this cat look really goofy and then click OK. And it's quite fun to turn off and on that layer to see the difference. It's a great way to make caricatures. Definitely fun to do it with a person photo. So I'm going to take this a step further And actually, no, let me take that back. I'm going to turn off my liquify layer and make another duplicate of my background layer, because this one will try some other filters on. So you've got a duplicate of your background layer. Let's go up to the filter menu and just open the filter gallery. Now the filter gallery may have you zoomed in quite a bit on this picture. You can zoom back out by holding Command and the negative minus sign or plus. And yours probably looks different than mine because mine is showing me the filters that I last used. So here's our picture, and keep in mind the larger the picture is, or the more dots per inch or higher the resolution, the longer it'll take these effects to apply, and they might look different on a higher resolution image than on a low resolution image. This one's kind of in the middle. Here to the right you can see I've got a kind of a menu of folders. These are categorized, so I can click on this little arrow to show all of them, and then you can just click through to see what these do. Now most of these also have controls here to the further right, where you can control things such as brush size or the amount of detail that will happen in this filter. By clicking just from one filter to the next, we're not applying multiple filters, we're just clicking through to find a single filter to see what it does. Now, one of my favorite filters to use that I actually use quite frequently is in the sketch folder. It's called Stamp. Now, Stamp will take whatever your foreground color is and look at the image and create just a black and white version and stamp in whatever color you've got selected. Now, this is probably not the best example to use this on, but you can see as I adjust the smoothness and the dark and light balance, I actually get a pretty good black and white stylized version of this picture. What's another one? Halftone pattern. Note paper gives you kind of a cool effect. Photocopy. Charcoal. All of these you can affect the strength of. Now you can also add a second effect on top of this one. This area in the bottom right hand corner is kind of like a layers panel, and I can add a new effect by clicking the new add effect button. Once you've done that, it might slow your computer down a bit, but you can click through and add another effect on top of the original and then adjust it so that it interacts to give you a really unique look to whatever picture that you're working on. Once you've achieved the look that you like, simply click OK, and depending on the size of your image and the complexity of those filters, it might take a minute to render, and then it will spit out whatever settings that you've got set. So that is one way to add some different interesting textures to an image. Now I'm going to make one more copy of my background layer and hide the one we just did and show you kind of a couple more features in that filter gallery. So I'm going back to my filter gallery. By the way, the filter gallery has some of these things inside of it, but most of these exist differently, and there's things like distort, where you could do a twirl. Wow, that really twists it up, amongst other things. So just keep in mind it's not just the filter gallery, and there's also these down here, but I'm going to go back to the filter gallery just to show you that you can, once you've added a second one, you can get rid of it by clicking on it and hit the trash button. I'm going to make my picture fill the whole frame by hitting Command 0. And then you need to know that there are also some texture options. So one of the most popular is probably the paper texturizer, and because this photo is fairly large, you're probably not going to see much of a texture on your screen of this tutorial, but if you're trying this out you should see it on your picture. And you can scale the amount of the effect as well as the shadows that will be generated. There's things like stained glass, grain, or mosaic tiles that can all give this a different look. Um, this one can generate a look for a cross stitcher if you wanted to see how a image reduces down to single colors. So each one of those squares are now a single color. So I'm going to say that's pretty much it for the gallery. There's lots of other options in here you can play with, but I'm going to say that's good and you can try those all out. I'm hitting cancel on mine so we can take a look at just a couple more under the filter menu. One of the ones I use quite frequently are the blur options, such as Gaussian blur. Now if I hit Gaussian blur, I have the option to make everything blurry. Now this applies to the entire layer. With all of these effects, if you add an effect such as the Gaussian blur and hit OK, keep in mind that if this is a duplicate of your original layer, you can add a layer mask and paint with black paint and a fuzzy brush onto your layer mask to expose the layer beneath it. So you are masking away and hiding the layer with the layer mask or with the effect. Now the next couple of videos will actually show you how CS6 has become set up so that you can do things like this iris blur with a filter library that is very cool to work with. But I wanted to show this particular example because if you have a version of Photoshop that is older than CS6, you won't have the tools to do the next couple of videos. So this is a way that you can create a kind of fake depth of field like you would have achieved if you had a camera with a really large f-stop. And that's the filter library. Remember, you have to be in RGB for all of those to be available, though many of them will work with CMYK pictures, and it will permanently affect the pixels of a layer. So if you want to preserve your original, you should make a duplicate of it to apply your filter to.